I have a simple line. Context leads to good content. Good content leads to good commerce. For all news organizations, from a commercial or a business organization perspective, content is your product. What do we sell? We sell content. We might have the best of managers and bringing about massive transformational changes, turnaround stories like TV9 under our very, very able and visionary leader, Mr. Barun Das. But the fact of the matter is, it's at the core of any news organization, whether in print or television, it is content. So in that sense, it's important to look at the changing landscape, but don't divorce your core reality.
Right.
That's very, very important. Technology is going to be the big driver. This big debate about who is the king and queen in this content versus carriage,
Yeah.
but they have to play together. If there is a mindset that I'm not going to be aligned with all other key stakeholders, then you are ruined. But can AI pick up facts? Input is very important. I call it input.
Right.
News gathering. तो सूत्रधार AI बन नहीं सकता. सूत्रधार एक AI facilitator हो सकता. Use these tools as force multipliers from a perspective of reaching maximum audiences and from a perspective of cost optimization. So I don't think we should be scared of AI. We should integrate it to the extent it's required. Learn from the technology as it shapes up. Fact checking is inherent to journalism. I don't think any AI piece can do fact checking because it picks from an environment which is already embedded with a lot of unfactual things.
I want to touch upon the experience you had from your German tour. You took Indian media to a European country. How was the experience there? What was the logic behind it? And what are the insights that you drew from it?
We did it for, the larger story called the Indian perspective. When I say Indian perspective, please don't conflate it with a, central government perspective or a BJP perspective. India is a very, very diverse country. Our strength is our democracy. Our strength is pluralism. We want to showcase that in a global context. Germany was a great eye-opener. We had 2 cabinet ministers coming from here. And we had 2 senior ministers from Germany. There were 3 state governments. Look at the plurality that I keep talking about the Indian story. Punjab, Karnataka, both non-BJP ruled, and Gujarat. They all, had their presence at the Germany summit.
Hello and welcome to the show Indian Media with Dhiren Experts. Here we discuss trends and opportunities that impact careers in the media and entertainment sector. I'm your host, Dhiren. Today we have Rakesh Khar, editor of News9 Mediaverse English Cluster, which is India's first fully integrated digital news brand. It is part of TV9 Network, India's most prominent news brand, which has TV channels in various languages and also has significant presence in digital space with platforms such as News9 and Money9. Mr. Khar has played a vital role in expanding all these brands, and he has spent nearly 3 decades in the media business, leading newsrooms with different prominent media brands, and has also interviewed hundreds of global and political leaders across his careers. Khar sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dhiren, for inviting me. You've been kind and generous. One little correction, TV9 Network is India's largest and number 1 television news network. So I just thought that, let me just put facts into context. You're most welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I think podcasts today are the order of the day. India is a little late to, so to say, be sensitive to them, but we do know the potential. And I'm happy someone like you who is at the cusp from, comms to content is active in this space. And I wish you all the best for your series of podcasts. And I look forward to the feedback that we have at the end of this conversation from all multiple stakeholders.
Thank you, sir. Looking forward to that. And one of the most prominent things that everyone would want to know, that from your vast experience as a media leader, as an editorial leader, what advice would you give to aspiring journalists and editors to excel in this profession, especially when there is so much of chaos happening? What qualities do you think would define success in this field today?
Thank you, Dhiren. It's a very important question, but I don't want to sound preachy because I'm learning even today, at 59 plus. I think it's important to, the beauty about journalism and media and creativity as an art is that, you keep learning, unlearning, relearning. So that's that's the key difference or the distinction, if I can call it, between being an engineer and, or a creative guy, because you keep unlearning and at the same time learning. But based on my cumulative experience, I would summarize it as the follows. First and foremost, read. There's such a great tendency and urge today to speak. and right. People have so much opinion within them. They may not always be qualified to speak their mind out. If you're not a journalist, you're free to speak your mind out without the right context and the domain knowledge. But when you are a journalist, it's important that people do see you as being extremely confident, extremely contextualized, and being factual and credible. Unfortunately, I think most of the journalists today, because of the multimedia layer, tend to ignore reading. It's a decelerating skill, and I'm worried at the out of my 3 decades plus career, that the kind of time that I spend reading today, or many of my generation do, younger generations don't do that. That's one. Second most important point is that, like any profession, our profession also has gone through a churn and metamorphosis. Beats have come under the hammer. One can have academic debate whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing to do. uh, Journalism quite often was described as being generalist. It's like a generalist, as an OPD doctor who can examine you from your nose to toe to head and everything. So in that sense, I think we're back to that generalist stage. And the most important perspective there from my learning is that the stories at the cusp. Any story today, say for instance about India, what defines Dateline India? It is the intersection of politics, business, culture, and society, the civil society. No story can purely be called as a business story or a purely a cultural story. I give this example in my own little training sessions that I do. Varanasi, for instance. For ages, Varanasi was described as a story which is purely cultural, and then it became religious. Now, today, it's a story of infrastructure. It's a story of, politics. It's a story about culture. It's a story about religion. It's a story which is at the cusp of all these 4 or 5 strands. If you apply the same yardstick therein, you will notice that each story is at the cusp. So if, you tell a story and say, Varanasi, I got into the, city and I saw a Kullad, competing with a McDonald's burger, Jalebi competing with a Aloo Mekki Tikki. And Aloo Mekki Tikki burger is also an Indianized version of McDonald's. And then you slowly get into the city and you tell the story of the city, drawing its very, very rich past. So that is storytelling. Journalists have to be storytellers. That storytelling as an art has to be ingrained. So I think that's very, very, very important. Learn from politicians. When I was in Economic Times in the 90s, we used to have a political page, which was very, very powerful. It's even now a very powerful page. And remember, then I came to Economic Times from a small paper in Kashmir called Kashmir Times, where I used to cover terrorism. And then I came into business journalism without any business background. So those kind of leeways were there, but it was journalism that drew me there, and it was great quality of journalism that manifested in ET. So the point I was trying to make is that politicians those days, I don't want to name, but very senior politicians that I met, would be a little averse to, anything to do with business. And slowly, I saw the interest of politicians in business, because that's where their constituency is apart from the voter. So they, exercise tremendous amount of influence being at the cusp. So journalists have to be at the cusp. Whether you talk to a bureaucrat, a politician, or a, administrator, or you talk to a civil society leader, if you're able to gauge the mood about that particular development, you're telling a story almost complete.
Right. Because of digital innovations that are happening, you are in the middle of building MediaVerse for News9. I wanted to understand from your perspective about the big shifts that are happening in news production, distribution, consumption, engagement, and all the metrics that we focus on.
Before we come to that, I think you also asked me about the editors, because, that's a peer group. I don't want to, so to say, quantificate. But a couple of things I think is very, very important is, the same formula. Bring about a paradigm shift every 5 years. If editors have to survive, they have to learn to, reimagine themselves, because the profession itself is reimagining. So
Correct.
I think, I have been lucky and privileged to have people around me who have given me that opportunity. And that's why, I'm still probably in an active role. People who are purely driven by the comma, full stop context are, so to say, I think, divorced from the ground reality. So for their own survival and for the learning they have for the newsroom, it's very important that editors reinvent. That's for
Right.
themselves. As for
Yeah.
the newsroom, my view is that, editors continuously need to look at India beyond metros. Unfortunately, most of the, big ticket English press, both in television and in print, and dare say even Hindi, there's this big metro or mega metros is a very sexy dateline. But India is growing and thriving. There's a massive story in, rest of India, as I call it.
Right.
There is mega metros, there is emerging metros, then there is this rest of India.
Yeah.
So there is a constraint there because editorial coverage means a cost. Content is a cost center. And, when it's a cost center, the challenge is that people tend to deploy your content armory around areas which are geographically close. So that has to, move on. Because if you have to really look at, covering India, Indian Express is a good example there because they do send their reporters. TV9 is a great example. Bharatvarsh, we sent reporters to war zones, and that's how we came to be known as India's CNN in terms of coverage. Because you have to apportion coverage beyond your comfort zone. Comfort zone is Delhi NCR, Mumbai, larger Mumbai, at best Navi Mumbai, Thane. Thane is now politically important because of the Shindes of the world. But one has to go beyond it. And third, and quickly, the last point is that editors who are experienced need to spend and have an institutionalized way of training younger journalists. That is not happening to the extent it should happen.
Yeah.
Coming to question on how is the landscape changed. See, like it or not, it's a landscape which is changing every second. When I was in print, people said, television is coming. It was very exciting, very sexy. And I also was among the first print journalists to leave and join, Raghav in 1995. Then I came to Z, launched Z News with many other esteemed colleagues. The medium is evolving. Every medium has its own grammar. Now, is there a space for what we call mediaverse? Is there a space for marriage of all the mediums with the same set of resources? So the reality in that is that all that print television, as we keep discussing who will grow, who will not grow, who will die, there is a big elephant in the room, that's social media. All the big stories, let's face it, are breaking on Twitter or breaking on Insta, and more so Twitter. And a lot of opinions are also generating them, which may not be validated opinion, but then there is so much of polarization on social media. And all these platforms are not in the traditional domain. So these are realities that is, so to say, facing us and staring us in our face. The transition also means that the level of confidence a consumer has in journalism also has fallen. There's this Reuters report which has been quite often quoted in the recent months, which talks about falling levels of trust and confidence in the news genre, which is an extremely worrying issue for all of us. And part of that is also the advent of social media. Part of that is also because we rely on social media. There is need to reinvest that faith in journalism. And that is a key takeaway for me as a journalist, and also for all news organizations from a commercial or a business organization perspective. Content is your product. What do we sell? We sell content. We might have the best of managers and bringing about massive transformational changes, turnaround stories like TV9 under our, very, very able and visionary leader, Mr. Barun Das. But the fact of the matter is it's at the core of any news organization, whether in print or television, it is content. So in that sense, it's important to look at the changing landscape, but don't divorce your core reality.
Right.
That's very, very important. Technology is going to be the big driver. I'm not saying technology is, this big debate about who is the king and queen in this content versus carriage, but they have to play together. If there is a mindset that I'm not going to be aligned with all other key stakeholders, then you are ruined. Then your business paradigm, your content paradigm, your journalistic paradigm all will go for a six. You have to optimize each layer, each leg, each pillar of the overall landscape and see how you learn from that and then go into making a virtue of it. Look at elections is the biggest news event in any country. We saw 2024 was the election year globally, with so many countries going to polls, the latest one being US. If you go back a little bit, then 2014 was an election which was fought on Twitter, the first ever social media. And then, 2020, 2019 was a bit of a WhatsApp, came into an institutionalized way.
Correct.
Now, 2024 was on YouTube. Many of us didn't know that YouTube could, truly become an independent platform to carry an opinion and also do a journalism. One can have say that, those views were probably, polarized, but there is polarization on either side. So now American election, to put it in context, has been won or lost on podcasts. So I think, you're right, bang on in terms of, identifying. So we don't know how it pans out. So if you're a traditional journalist and an editor, and if you're not seized off, sensitized about all these realities of life, I guess the end is not far.
So I think which is why in News9 you say it's a fully integrated platform rather than saying this is better than the other.
Well,
So, in
yeah, I'm happy to share with you now. I think our business leadership, our editorial leadership was invested in the landscape that you're talking about. So, what we did, we launched India's first OTT news app. OTT is again a big elephant in the room. Everybody watches television today or video on OTT. The subscription model is a challenge there because Indians are not yet ready to pay, for good content. They would love good content, but they don't necessarily pay for that. So that's why even Netflix of the world are not making a great business case. But it's an investment. So we did that investment. And we also got into the digital, or what we call connected streams. Because from a business perspective, about 50 or 40%, there's an argument on that, of the cost in running a news television establishment is in carriage, is in distribution. So if you bypass that and seed good quality content for the end consumer, then your ability to stand on your own feet in a quicker time is much more possibility. And I'm happy to share now from about, we did this summit in Germany on which I'll come to later. Coinciding with that, we also have now gone on DTH. So we seeded the idea. Now look at the planning that we did. We seeded the idea for an English platform without burning ourselves. And at the same time, we, now are also on DTH. We are on, and also all big ticket cable platforms. So in the product evolution life cycle, we are growing and learning from the environment and making use of it.
I think most of the journalists learn through a lot of doing rather than.
Yeah, you can't put your hands at the back and then say that, हो जाएगा, मेरे पास बहुत अच्छा product है, मैं
Yeah.
बेस्ट हूँ. लेकिन मैं वातावरण से नहीं सीखूंगा, मैं वातावरण से डरूंगा भी नहीं, लेकिन वातावरण को एक अपना फ्रेंड भी नहीं बनाऊंगा.
Hmm.
वातावरण जो है, जिसको I call the landscape, you have to befriend it from a perspective of learning from it.
Yeah, I was reading a book, Obstacle is the Way. It's by
Absolutely.
Ryan Holiday. So
Yeah,
instead of fearing from it, you need to learn from it and make it work for yourself.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sir, I want to touch upon the experience you had from your German tour. You took Indian media to a European country. How was the experience there? What was the logic behind it? And what are the insights that you drew from it?
Dhiren, good that you flagging it. I'm happy you noticed it. The entire media noticed it. But we didn't just do it for the peer media. We did it for the larger story called the Indian perspective. When I say Indian perspective, please don't conflate it with a central government perspective or a BJP perspective. India is a very, very diverse country. Our strength is our democracy. Our strength is pluralism. We want to showcase that in a global context. I must tell you that as a journalist, the whole world is talking about India. We're the fastest growing economy. We have our own challenges. I'm not saying that we're the best, but the trajectory, the graphs and the charts are looking very, very good. And we are the largest consumer market in the world, so nobody can ignore us. People have realized that. We are the largest, we have the aspiration to be the largest producer of goods also. So that's where our manufacturing story has to kick in. And once that kicks in, services story is already very good. We are a formidable force. And most importantly, I say the collective aspiration of 1.4 billion to tell the world that we want our own say and share of voice in the global community. That is the logical context for us to go global. And believe me, marking the interest that the world has in India, marking the India growth story and its road ahead. We'll have many challenges here and there, but if we could surmount the challenge of COVID and come out to be the fastest growing economy continually, I don't think we have a challenge. I think news media must remember that it has a role to play. As I said, even in the context of editors, we need to look beyond our nose. We need to invest in it's not just the role of the government, whether it's the state or the center, to fashion or articulate an Indian perspective. It is the role of the media. So what we did, Germany was a great eye-opener. We had two cabinet ministers coming from here, and we had two senior ministers from Germany, apart from many other. The mayor of Stuttgart was there. We did it in Stuttgart, the city of precision, the city of engineering, the city of Mercedes-Benz, Porsche, and lots more. So there is a buoyancy in India-Germany relationships. India is keen to make an impact in Europe. Europe is keen to make, led by Germany, to be seen in India. So in that sense, MD Barun envisioned this idea. And the learning is phenomenal. I think, right from and it was not just a diaspora play, though they played a very critical role. It is the real stakeholders in Germany and in India that we managed to do it. I don't know whether you know that there were 3 state governments. Look at the plurality that I keep talking about the Indian story. Punjab, Karnataka, both non-BJP ruled, and Gujarat, who were, so to say, partners in this initiative. They all had their presence at the Germany summit. And look at the
Yeah.
storyline. We did content, AI, Gen Z, consumer, technology, democracy. We did power. All these stories are with the digital global highway. You don't locate a content to a particular region if it's good. A great example and learning is from the Korean serials. They become an instant hit in
Correct.
India, and that K-pop or the K-piece, as we call it, now is so. If Indian content, Indian storytelling, Indian
Mm.
aspiration, India's rise in the global galaxy of
Mm.
leaders needs to be told. And we felt it's diplomacy's role only to do a bilateral relationships. I think media has to be an enabler. Every state therein, as a business journalist, as a student of comms, you would know that every state is doing global investor summits.
Yes.
So my editorial line all through has been a strong India means a strong center and strong states. So who is going to tell that story? If you're consumed by, one state against the other and all states against center, you are playing a very, very small, narrative, which is not always in the interest of the country. A strong set of states and a strong center together, driven by the aspiration of 1.4 billion people, is what drives the India global story. And that's why
Correct.
News9 Global Summit in Germany is a landmark in itself. I think it's probably, I may be immodest, first of its kind to be done by any global player. And now we will also move places. We plan to pick up the learning and do it in other parts of the world.
Right. So, wish you the best for all those
Yeah.
ventures that are coming
Yeah.
up. I wanted to understand
I, in fact,
in the beginning of the conversation.
I must tell you, grudgingly though, is also taking note of India growth story. We know about New York Times of the world, and there's a certain view. They do great journalism, but they have a certain Western perspective, which is embedded over the decades. And there's an Indian perspective, or there's a South perspective, as we call it. India is being positioning as the leader of the global South. Then there's the emerging markets perspective. All these are like, many, many sub layers. What India has done is that with its, newfound diplomatic, principles or operating principles, what we call, we have moved from, non-alignment to multi-alignment. We have moved from multilateralism. We have not divorced it. We are members of many multilateral fora to minilaterals. Because, see, relationships are happening if there is a win-win for two players or two partners, whether it's countries or two companies, there is going to be a new lexicon to define that relationship. So
Right.
I think a magazine like Economist, for instance, I must credit them.
Yeah.
They're seeing a lot of traction in India. And from probably a one story, which also would be like, the Rona Dona story, which is, I'm saying, there are challenges. There are enormous challenges. Our per capita income has to perk up to a significant level. We need to move away from this 80 crore free ration to a situation where all those people are able to earn on their own and feed themselves. So that's another debate for another day. But the fact of the matter is that the India's IT story, AI story, a fascinating story Economist did, that how India is driving global outbound tourism.
Yes.
That's a fascinating story. I mean, no Indian media has done it. But
Yeah.
these are stories which are being watched from the outside. And they don't have an agenda about, pro-BJP, anti-BJP, pro-Congress, anti-Congress. These narratives, we need to rise about them and, and serve India as a nation.
Yeah, purely look at the opportunities which are there, which are going to help people lead a better life, make more money, have a fulfilling
Absolutely.
career. Yes.
Absolutely.
So, given all these shifts, in the beginning of the conversation, you said most medias need to go deeper into the heartland of the country, but you are not only going in the heartland, you're also expanding international.
That's right.
So, given all these things which are changing, what are the priorities for an editor today, given the business pressures, audience engagement, and digital rankings?
So I think, it works that I have a simple line. Context leads to good content. Good content leads to good commerce. I have never, ever, believe me, I early on in my role at Z News, my first stint, which was from 1997 till 2001, for about a year, the then group CEO, Mr. Vijay Jindal, who was an industry veteran, you would have heard the name, asked me to become the brand manager for Z News. I was a little at a loss, but that learning was enormous, because then I saw the news room from a 360-degree perspective. See, content is essentially a cost. Let's remember that. So when there is pressure on margins, you will have to bring in that new age paradigm about not becoming a salesman, but also being aligned to the larger business objectives of the organization. And I want to make a very nuanced point here. In India, unfortunately or fortunately, we have the public broadcaster, which is Doordarshan, good, bad, ugly, but they have had their own moments of glory. But there is, obviously a better expectation. But in absence of a robust public broadcaster, or many of them, couple of them, there is an expectation from the private sector media that, they'll play that role as well. But, private sector media is essentially owned by private capital. And you know it, private capital is core imperative, like it or not, is profitability. So in that sense, given these contradictions, given these, challenges, journalism has to thrive without, shutting your eyes to these ground realities.
Correct.
I mean, if there are 2,000 journalists and if they do great job for a month, but their next month's salary is not coming, I think we have a challenge.
Right.
To
That is true.
sustain good journalism, you need to be, you need to be alive to the reality, as I call the market realities of running a enterprise, which incidentally is media.
And people who have the enterprise, they are running their own channels and witnessing quite a good success also.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, don't divorce the fundamentals of journalism.
Mm.
Please remember that. And at the same time, embrace fundamentals of business, which is that you have to earn a salary. You can't be bright and shining for few months and few weeks and then suddenly collapse because you don't have the funds to sustain yourself.
Right. Yeah.
I wish more and more capital comes into private sector media, and we have many more players so that there's greater competition and there is greater play for good journalism.
So my next question is about Indian companies, be it startups or MNCs. What should they understand about the growing influence of Indian media? How can they build a meaningful relationship with the Indian media?
See, I think we moved again. Like I said, politicians used to shun business. Now they're, like part of it, the political economy story. Similarly, I think media and corporates, they need to understand each other's requirements. So I think the first and foremost is information. Information is sacrosanct, and quality of access has to improve. If you, as a MNC or a big Indian enterprise or corporate, think that, you can own the media by means which are non-journalistic, I think, that's where there's a problem. I think there is tremendous amount of appetite for quality content. Some of the younger journalists are very good, though I feel that quality of journalists coming into the media needs to improve. I was on the board of IMC for about 7 years. I did lament a bit that better quality journalists need to come. They're motivated essentially by the glamour part of it, not the gravitas part of it. So I think
Correct.
we need to work on that.
Once that perspective changes, they will start looking and
They'll
working
start
towards it
looking
in a
at
different
stories.
way.
So I think journalists need quality access, and I think there's a larger alignment. For instance, digitizing India is a big theme, and it encompasses it, whole lot of companies from an Intel to a IBM to even a SBI, because which is digitizing the Yono map. So these are stories where even media has tremendous interest. So I think that alignment with the larger India story, I gave you the example of economists, I gave you our own News9 example going to Germany. All corporates active in India need to look at expanding their horizons in building the India story and articulate challenges they have from a policy framework. We still have improved on ease of doing business, but there are many roadblocks. We need to improve that further. So in that sense, if media can be an enabler and say that, look, I want to, showcase problems faced by companies, say on taxation, on regulatory clearances, especially once you go down into the state. So, I used to, I wouldn't name the company, but a major American company many years ago, so which said that, we get all the reception in the capital, whether it be the state capital or the central capital. But once you go down to setting up a plant, that's where the problems start beginning. So those are genuine issues. But if you're trying to push competition, if you're trying to run down, or if you're trying to crave for monopolies using media, I think, then that's the challenge. So my summary is that all corporates, MNCs or Indian, who are aligned with the India growth story, India driving a bigger say on the global head table, are welcome to partner media. And I must tell you that my experience with Network 18 for about 6-7 years, I was, responsible for what we call partner content or special projects. I was leading it for the entire network. It was a very, very enriching experience. And I saw that when you do that, there is a massive, learning, and all that effort from content perspective, from commerce perspective, aligns to the India growth story. I'll just give you an example. For instance, we worked with Vedanta. Now, India's import dependence is so high in the energy sector, whether it is coal or whether it is, fuel. So 70 years of our existence, or 75 years now, we have not been able to find the right solution where we can also improve our domestic out. So if a particular company is pushing for raising the domestic capability, I don't think there's anything wrong, because it's aligned with India's, or for instance, if we want to leverage natural resources, we have natural resources. We don't have the best of natural resources, say, for instance, like Canada, Australia, but have we, the contribution of natural resources to GDP is very low today. We have to improve that. All that will lead to India's import dependence coming down, and then our ability to stand on our feet and tell the world that we exist, and we exist strongly. Don't ignore us. Take us seriously, and we'll do it our way. For instance, we did the oil deal, as I kept saying, multilingual, multi-alignment, and the minilaterals. So Russia's oil import was a deal. We are friends with America, great friends, strategic relationships. But we did what suited us. And initially, the world was with circumspect, but then they took note. It's fair enough. Fair. You will look after yourself better than looking after someone else.
Right. And all the major economies already do that. We did nothing new.
I mean, it was China and India both bought, from Russia. So that's what I call assert, exert, and any corporation which is a part of that story and has a contribution. I guess we have so many thriving MNCs. We have so many big ticket Indian corporates. The big India corporate story needs to be told by the media. But we also need to say that, for now, post-COVID, as an editor, I'm speaking now. Sorry, I get into that hat repeatedly. The private sector investment, that capex, hasn't kicked in, which is sad. I think, what are they waiting for? Private sector is all about risk appetite. If you don't do it at, say, 7% GDP growth rate, when do you do it? So if you call out private sector for not kicking in its private, capex, why should we only be dependent on government expenditure all the while? It has a limitation. And now we have seen there's been a fall in the government expenditure. There's been no matching growth in private capex, and our GDP has come down. I hope I didn't get too technical with my answer.
No, sir. But in your response, you made some very important points. One is the growing influence of media has to be leveraged by Indian companies when they want to expand international.
That's right.
Not having an Indian voice to talk about the stakeholders domestically always falls flat when they expand international, because then they start relying on the media of that country.
Yeah. Even in domestic market, if they need, they need those inputs. So as I gave you the ease of doing business story. So I think we need to showcase stories, best practices. In fact, I'm looking at sometime working on a book on best practices of India, and probably worst practices of India from a business perspective. So I would want, as an author, to, all businesses to come and be upfront and say that, we launched this project in record time. We have one or two great examples like Ratan Tata's Sanad project, when, he was, he sent a SMS and the project was engineered. I'm sure there must be many more such stories which need to be told, how from a, Mamata Banerjee to a Stalin, to a Karnataka chief minister, to a Devendra Fadnavis or a Shinde, are ever so keen. Please understand today, as I said, I'm repeating that point. Today's politician is extremely keen to be seen on the right side of the business, because he wants growth. The chief minister wants to be known as a CEO chief minister. So seize that opportunity.
Correct. So one last question about with all the innovation disruption that is happening with AI, social media, digital tools, what are the biggest opportunities or risks that you foresee in 2025 for media?
The media GDP growth rate by and large has been stable. We need to keep the momentum going. People keep talking about AI and technology. We need to be having the best technology on our right side. We are not in conflict with technology. We are not in conflict with new ideas. We need to use those to play to our strength. You can't fight tomorrow's battles with yesterday's tools. So in that sense, AI is welcome, and AI has to play a very important role. I mean, let's be factual. We all have talked about multimedia convergence, but doing it in a human perspective hasn't yielded the best of the results. The reason for that is also, suppose someone is essentially a print journalist. Now he has to do video, he has to do social media. So he may not be always equipped. And also, what happens is that every medium has its own grammar. There's a nuance to the medium.
Correct.
So someone may be very good with print, but may not be very good with TV. So that will show. Then this language issue of Hindi, English. So despite the best intentions of all the newsroom editors and owners, this is an aspiration. So but it's not so easy because the cost to do this replication and the quality of that may not be always commensurate. So if AI is able to do, you are able to create versions of one content piece in many, many ways with the ease of technology and speed. You have then leveraged and optimized that particular product. But can AI pick up facts? Input is very important. I call it input.
Right.
News gathering. Will it be able to sift through the Varanasi example I gave you? I don't think so. The best of AI cannot locate that cusp. It
Correct.
can give you spikes. It can give you the high points. But it will not be able to put that together. वो सूत्रधार AI बन नहीं सकता. सूत्रधार एक AI facilitator हो सकता है. So I think, use these tools as force multipliers from a perspective of reaching maximum audiences and from a perspective of cost optimization. So I don't think we should be scared of AI. We should integrate it to the extent it's required. And learn from the technology as it shapes up. Fact checking is inherent to journalism. I don't think any AI piece can do fact checking because it picks from an environment which is already embedded with a lot of unfactual things. So, it will pick up that and it will show that again. So no machine can spell news. Only journalists can do that.
That is so true.
But we must invest back in journalism. That's a collective goal.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time and sharing your insights with us on multitude of opportunities and questions that I had. Surely India has a lot of potential and media will play a massive role in taking the Indian narrative to a global scale. Thank you for joining us.
With the News9 Global Summit in Germany, and we are committed under our leader, Dhiren, to, take it forward and go places. Thank you, Dhiren, for the opportunity. I'm grateful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.